Welcome to everybody who's participating. We'll probably have a few more come in. Thanks to all of the editors who are here. I think we have a few that may show up in just a few minutes, but we've got plenty to start with and get moving. This is the first session of the X-Culture Research Interest Group Zoom meetings for this semester. We have two this semester. We'll talk about the second one, which comes in a couple of weeks after this one. But this is a Meet the Editor session. They're usually very informative. We have a mixed group of researchers here, from very experienced to middle level to inexperienced. So it's very useful for everybody involved to have sessions like this, especially for people that don't have the ability to regularly attend conferences where these sessions often happen. So we have five different people scheduled, or five different journals. The Journal of Management Education with Jennifer Leigh and Melanie Robinson, European Journal of International Management with Nicole, Franziska, Richter, and Sven Horak, Gordon Schmidt from the Management Teaching Review, thank you, and Stefan Gershewski from European Management Journal. He should be joining us any moment. And then Vaz is here representing about three different journals. So International Journal of International Management, International Journal of HRM, and Cross-Cultural Strategic Management. So we have a lot on the plate. I won't speak much further because I'd like to give the journal editors all the time they need. So we're going to go for about 5 to 7 minutes with each journal to present what they do, their focus, and any editorial advice or comments, and then open up the floor to questions and answers from the group for anything they would have in a panel type discussion. So with that said, is Jennifer here yet or no? Oh,
I'm
Melanie,
here.
you're here? Yeah, and hi, Nicole, you're here. So I think we have everybody here. Let's get started with Jennifer and Melanie. I had you guys on the agenda first. Are you okay going first, Melanie? Or would you like to wait for Jennifer?
I'm here, David, and happy for us to go. If you could allow us to share screens, that would be lovely.
Okay. Now you're getting fancy with me. Hold on a second. Vaz, do you know how to do that? Oh, here it is.
Yes, working on it. Yes.
So while that's happening, I just want to thank you for allowing us to join you. Okay, is that showing?
Yes.
Yes.
Super. So I am Dr. Jennifer Leigh, and I'm a professor of management at Nazareth University in Rochester, New York, USA. And I'm here with Melanie, my colleague. Melanie, would you like to say hello?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us today.
Okay. So we formed the co-editor team. I think I've got the slideshows going now, and can people see the captions at the bottom? Is that working? Okay, super. Just want to make sure we have all the parts going. So welcome everyone to this session. We're really delighted to be here with you today. This is the second time we've been able to join this research group, and we're really happy to be back. We always like to start our journal presentations with acknowledging our team. The work of journals is really thankless work, and it really happens as a result of a community of volunteers, which includes our associate editors, as well as our army of reviewers around the world, which perhaps includes some of you attending this session, and I know some of you on this panel as well. So thanks to all of you for your support of the journal. The Journal of Management Education is the oldest journal that focuses on experiential and active learning in management education. There's a variety of journals, and you'll hear from a couple journals from our society, the Management and Organizational Behavior Teaching Society, which is the sponsor of our journal. That's the focus of our scope. We're really interested in articles that are centered around management education that is looking at student learning outcomes. So what students are intended to learn and experience as a result of your practices. Most recently, we've debuted with an impact factor of 1.4. We're extremely excited. We were on the emerging index for a long time. We have now emerged with a number, and our acceptance rate is a little under 10% these days. So some figures, but don't be discouraged by the acceptance rate numbers. We do receive a lot of submissions, like most journals, that are outside of the fit. And so our hope today is for people to understand the fit with our journal and the other journals, so that you really prepare and can tailor your manuscript to increase your chances of getting into peer review. When we look at an article that's come to us, we always are scanning for two major questions. So everything that comes in is reviewed by both Melanie or myself, and we're asking ourselves the question, will this manuscript have a significant impact on the thinking and practice of management education? Or will this contribution help readers think innovatively about management education? So we're not particularly interested in hearing about things that we know are established best practices for experiential and active learning, with one exception I'll talk about later. But in general, we're really interested in helping push the field in responding to what's needed for today's learners and the environments in which we face as educators. We have 5 sections in which you can make the contributions. I won't go into depth with all of these. I encourage folks to come out to our editor's office hours, which will be next week. I'll put this on the slide and in the chat later to really get into the details. But our largest section, where most of our submissions, is what we call the empirical, theoretical, or review articles. These are traditional scholarship of teaching and learning, and they should be structured and following best practices of research. You should have a methodology section. It shouldn't be so elaborate that there's no space to talk about the implications for practice, which is what we're interested in if you're conducting an empirical study. We have other opportunities to contribute that we think are appropriate for our field, like essays, where you can have a provocation around important issues, or share a position that you think is relevant on a hot or contemporary topic. They're not rants, and they're an opportunity where we can also set up rejoinders or other commentaries in the same topic area. Our signature pedagogy section within the journal is an instructional innovation. This is where you've created something, an exercise, simulation, or activity to help students understand or access an important concept in management learning. It should be grounded in the literature and provide evidence of effectiveness. So in the bottom of this slide, we've created a table because over the years, people have asked, what is evidence of effectiveness? And so we're interested in people providing a variety of qualitative or quantitative data, and you can read through some of this, but I'll just point out one aspect is that we're not interested in letter course grades or assessment marks at the broadest level. Those tend not to be granular enough to link to the learning outcomes that you're trying to achieve with your instructional innovation. So we can talk about this more in editors' office hours or conferences, and you'll get access to these slides afterwards as well. But instructional innovations, Melanie and I basically arm wrestle over these when they come in. We love to read them, and we love to hear all the creative things happening in your field. Another section, which I mentioned earlier, is an instructional change in context. So if you are taking on an innovative pedagogy, for instance, maybe you're bringing X culture to your institution and it's the first time you've done global virtual teaming, you could describe the change implementation process at your institution. And so we're interested in these pieces where you're describing how you brought in an experiential and active learning mode to your institution and the stages and conversations and steps you went through, so other people can implement that kind of pedagogical approach in their context. Because we know from our accrediting associations and also what our students are saying is that they want engaged learning practices, but it's not always easy to do. So these pieces are intended to be places where people can share that journey with our readers. And last, our newest section is interviews. This is an opportunity to speak with people who have perhaps accumulated a wisdom over the lifetime of teaching or bright lights in our field to talk about any given area of interest. And so we encourage people to look at examples in the journal. And if you would like to do an interview, please contact either Melanie or myself by using our editor's email to see if your topic is a fit. So it's not just a straight Q&A interview. You're going to situate it in a management education literature. And that's an important theme for us and all the contributions that come to the journal is to situate your research within the existing conversation. And that's not just Journal of Management Education, but more broadly, including, but not limited to, the Academy of Management Learning and Education, Management Learning, DSJIE, and many others. So I think that I'm getting close to my time, and I'll just wrap up and share that we have a special issue call celebrating our 50th anniversary of the journal. We also have a rolling call for special issues. If you have a topic area that you wish someone had written on, but it just doesn't exist, that's always a possible area for special issues. So again, reach out to us. We have a process and a template that we like people to use, and we coach folks. As I mentioned, we do have editors' office hours online to provide digital access to us. The next one is next week. And you can follow us on LinkedIn, where we post the Zoom link immediately before those sessions. We're at conferences. You can reach out by email. We do abstract review by email if you would like to connect with us. And of course, our institution's conferences, which are listed on this slide. So I know that was fast. I apologize for speaking so quickly. Melanie, anything I missed?
No, we're just excited to help connect and help authors to develop their papers and their projects going forward. We have a manuscript development workshop that we're hoping to run a little bit later this fall. So we're excited to talk to you guys about your projects and your ideas for management education research.
Oh, and one more thing, we'll have a write-a-thon, we hope, next week. So again, look at our LinkedIn page if you want to join. You can be writing anything, but if you want to just be with a group writing, we'll post some details on that. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Jennifer. I think there's a lot of opportunity, personally, from my viewpoint, there's a lot of opportunity for people that work in X culture to publish from a pedagogical perspective. It certainly, there's any number of angles you can take with this data and opportunities there. So both the journals we have here today that are pedagogically related, Gordon's too, I encourage a lot of people to look at potential submissions there because of that reason. It's a very wide open opportunity, in my view, for people to publish pedagogically. Okay. All right, next up, I think I'm going to change the agenda a little bit. Vaz has a meeting he has to be at for a doctoral defense. So I'm going to move him up on the agenda if that's okay with everybody, and let Vaz go next.
Yeah, thank you. So a couple of administrative issues. A few people asked about not being able to switch on the camera. So we have over 30 people in the audience, and so it's streamed as a webinar. So we have sort of people on the stage with the camera, and we have the audience. So if you cannot switch on your camera, it's just because you're not one of the presenters at this time, but you can always raise your hand, and we can add you to the stage, so to speak, so you can also engage. So another one, so I noticed, Jennifer, the subtitles for your presentation in PowerPoint, apparently, they were remarkably accurate. So I'm curious how it was done. So like even punctuation was proper. So I've never seen this level of accuracy. So I want to learn more about how it was done. So now I am an associate editor at several journals. So Journal of International Management, International Journal of Human Resource Management, Cross-Cultural Strategic Management, and also in a lesser role at the International Journal, European Journal of International Management. Rather than talking about the journals per se, I'll talk about my experience as an editor in a way that hopefully will be useful to those who are the authors. First, in terms of the journals, yes, both JIM and IHRM, they would be suitable journals to publish, and cross-cultural strategic management, they would be suitable journals to submit research based on ex-culture data. And what I mean by that is that if you use students as your study participants, these journals are open to this kind of research. So we have some journals, like, for example, JIBS, or even Journal of World Business now, they seem to be a little bit reserved or even completely anti any research that is based on student samples. And so that sometimes creates a problem. I believe that rule is unjustified, and in many cases, using students as research subjects is totally justified and even preferred. But some journals will not consider publications based on student samples. So JIM, IHRM, CCSM, eGIM, all of those would be suitable here. Second, from my point as an editor, the challenge that I face more and more is finding reviewers. Before COVID, at least at the kind of better journals, I would normally invite 5 people to review, and from that I knew I would get 3, at least 2 good reviewers. During COVID, everything became much worse. The rejection or the no response or I cannot refusal rate, they became much higher. And in all honesty, today, and I'm pretty sure that's the case for all other associate editors who actually need to assign reviewers, I habitually go with 10, 15, and sometimes even 20 reviewers that I invite just to get the 3 that I need. And so I'm not sure why it has changed after COVID. I guess during COVID, people used it as an excuse, and after it just became a habit. But even at better journals, you know, you literally get so many people who say, I'm not available. And so if it's an emergency, I always can reach out to people I know personally, whom I know will say yes if I ask them. But if I go with the suggestions recommended by the journal, or if I just simply do a search by the keywords or by the topic, it becomes quite a problem. What I do to sort of improve my chances of getting good reviewers, I look at the reviewer score. So most of the systems, most of the journals give you the statistics about the reviewer, such as how many journal papers the reviewer reviewed, how long it took the reviewer to review the papers, in how many cases the reviewer was late, but also what was the quality of the review as evaluated by the editors. And so it's almost, you know, an unfair game, because those who do a good job, so those who say yes more often and those who do it on time and do a good quality, they're the ones who get invited even more times, and so they get even more overloaded. And so I guess it's a little unfair here, but those people tend to be more reliable, and some people just keep saying no, or provide sometimes reviews that are late, or sometimes of bad quality. That happens even at the best journals. Sometimes the reviewers allows a couple of lines and it says something like good paper, but improve your literature review. I mean, what kind of review is that? I mean, it's not useful, or maybe something completely random. And so that's a challenge. So the request to the authors is, if the journals allow you to suggest reviewers, I would always do that. It does help. So if you suggest reviewers to me, I will not invite all of them. There will be always a few reviewers from my own list, but it does help to have some pre-selected people. So assuming you are doing it honestly, because I've seen some behaviors where colleagues sort of inform another colleague saying, hey, I want to nominate you as a reviewer. Would you be kind to me? That's not good. You know, I've seen that a few times and it makes me mad. It's, you know, and actually a couple of people invited me, you know, like, you know, some colleagues saying, hey, you know, I want to nominate you as a reviewer. Here is my paper. So, you know, it's from me. Would you be so kind to accept and maybe be nice to me? And so that puts me in a very tricky situation, because, I don't want to be in that situation. I don't want to say no to a colleague and upset them, but I don't want to review a paper where I know who the author is, and I would be biased. So I usually just reject those invitations, just to keep the sanity of the process, the integrity of the process. But so don't try to play those games. But if you know people who are impartial, who are not your colleagues, who would not know that that's you, but who are in that area, that will help for sure. Now, other things, in terms of, when you look at the high rejection rates, that's what Jennifer said. The journal she mentioned, she represented accepts only about 10% of the publications. And it seems to be about the percentage that you see for some of the better journals, like AMJ, AMR, they may accept only like 5%. But, anywhere between 10 to maybe even 15, 20%, it seems like extremely selective. The truth is that most of those rejections are desk rejections. And so even what makes it to my desk, so the editor-in-chief usually reviews the initial submissions. And at that stage, a lot of them being disqualified right there. So I'm guessing that probably at least half of the papers that are submitted get disqualified at that stage. A few times I had to step in and serve as an editor-in-chief while the editor-in-chief was not available. Like at one of the journals, the editor-in-chief had some medical emergency, and like for half a year I was doing that job. So from that experience, I learned that most of the submissions are not even close in terms of the scope and quality. I don't even know why people submit it. I guess they just send it everywhere, possibly even at the same time. But a good half of the submissions, they're not even international business. They're not even HR, for example, if that's what the journal specializes, like some random stuff. International management journals or international business journals always require that the context must be international. And a lot of submissions, maybe not bad, but it's like, basically based on, for example, Ghana or based on Ukraine. Well, just because it's not the United States, it doesn't make the journal international. Just because it's from a different country, so to speak, it doesn't make it international. So we want to have at least 2 countries. So many of those rejections are just because the scope, the fit is not there. And so if you pass that initial hurdle, then your acceptance rate is actually much higher. So it's not too bad. So just make sure that you read the scope and you learn what the journal does before you submit, because in many cases it just takes time from the editor and it does not improve your chances at all. So sometimes the quality is not there, and I will share here on my screen. I'll show you a couple of things, and I will be extremely careful here to highlight that it's my own bias. Moreover, not only other editors probably don't pay attention to these things, I recognize that I, as an action editor, should not be paying attention to these things. But the truth is that when I get so many submissions, and when I can accept only so few of them, I often look for reasons to reject a paper. And even though I try to resist this bias, but there are a few things which, when I see them in the paper, I immediately start forming a negative opinion about the paper. I immediately become sort of biased. And so chances of me being more favorable here are lower. And so I'll give you a couple of examples of things that at least tick me off. And so by that, I mean, they signal to me immediately that the author is an inexperienced author. And in and of itself, it's not a sin. So maybe an inexperienced author can still create a great paper. But how often do we see someone who has no experience and yet produces a great study? I mean, you've never seen a person who just wakes up one day and starts, playing piano or I don't know, figure skating or write a nice novel. It takes experience. It's the same thing with papers. It's very unusual to see, in fact, almost impossible to see someone without experience to write a good study. And so when I see signs of lack of experience, it immediately starts suggesting to me that maybe the study itself is not good. And so here are some of the things that I usually sort of perceive as a lack of quality. So let me share my screen here, and I'll show you a couple of, it's not the full list, but I'll show you some of the examples that I find somewhat problematic. So is it showing the screen that says funny fonts? Yeah, okay. So funny fonts. So papers should be written in Times New Roman 12, period. You can get away with Arial, you can get away with Calibri, but those who have been around long enough, they stick with Times New Roman 12. And while it's not forbidden to use any font, if you use some sort of like Bernada or some other funny, unusual font, it immediately tells me you have not developed the reflex to use Times New Roman 12. It means that you probably have not submitted more than a few papers. Little thing, doesn't really matter much, but when I see, fonts that are not standard, it immediately suggests that maybe this author sort of is a beginner. Another thing, like, for example, formatting of the tables. So tables need to be at the end of the manuscript, and tables need to be properly formatted. Now, many journals, in fact, most journals now allow tables in the body of the manuscript. But again, those of us who have been around it for at least 10 years, we will never put a table in the middle of the manuscript. And if it's in the middle, in the body of the manuscript, it tells me immediately must be some sort of a PhD student or some junior faculty who has not learned that tables go at the end. Not a huge deal, but again, it's just a little red flag to me. And obviously, nobody will be rejected for putting tables in the manuscript. As I said, it's allowed by most of the journals, but it usually suggests that the person probably doesn't have that much experience. Finding formatting of the table itself, like this is what a table should look like, right? So you have two horizontal lines, one line horizontal at the end, you don't have anything else. So when I see, too many lines, heavy lines, colorful lines, usually tells me the person probably has not read enough papers, because they would have developed this intuition that the table needs to look like this and not like this. Again, I will not disqualify a paper just because the table has all of the borders. But when I see it, it does signal to me that the person is not very experienced. And if so, can the person really produce high quality? And by the way, that also probably has the same effect on reviewers. So you don't want to give them a reason to sort of to doubt your experience. Inconsistent decimals, not a big deal. But when I see like sometimes 1 decimal, sometimes 3 decimals, sometimes 0 dot, sometimes just 0, dot 0 0, little thing. But again, those who have written enough papers, they are very acutely aware of these things, and they just put, always like 2 decimals or maybe 3. But when you see sometimes 1, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, not a very good sign. You don't want to, again, give. This is, that's a mortal sin. So like when people just simply take a snapshot of an output from like Stata, SPSS, or R and don't edit anything, and I see this all the time. So when I see this, that's a big no-no. Like immediately I'm like, okay, this person has no idea what they're doing. Again, it doesn't mean that the study is bad, but you don't want to, upset the reviewers or the editor with tables that are direct copy-paste from the software. You need a table that is, processed and gives only what needs to be there, not everything that your printout gives you from SPSS, for example. Low-resolution graphics, big sin. Again, usually you don't want to take a snapshot and put it in the picture in the manuscript. You probably want to have a native picture designed in Word so that it's, full resolution. So it's not, but even if you take a picture, make sure that it's high quality, because if I, as an editor or reviewer, see something like this, when it's almost unreadable, first of all, it's hard to work with. But second, it also immediately tells me that the person probably is not a very experienced researcher, publisher, reviewer. And so as a result, probably the rest of the study is not a very good quality. Not a huge deal, but also upsets me. So I think people do this because they try to minimize the number of words in the manuscript. So most of the journals have a word limit, like 6,000 words or 10,000 words. And so people think that if they take a picture of the table instead of the text, the count, the word count software will not count it as, extra 200 words. Well, first of all, one sort of secret is that nobody really cares that much about your page limit. If you have too many words, potentially it could be an issue, but at least I will never reject a paper just because it has 11,000 words instead of 10. And I've never had my manuscripts rejected due to the length of the manuscript. And my manuscripts are almost always over the word limit. You kind of want to stick with it, but because we're now electronic most of the time, it's not like the issue doesn't have enough pages. So I think you may be asked to shorten it at some point. You may, I don't know, if some editor is extremely picky, it may, they may send it back to you and ask you to shorten before it will be reviewed. But usually it's not a huge deal, unless it's like 25,000 words. At that point, it's obviously a problem. So I wouldn't try to play games and use pictures instead of tables, because first, the resolution suffers, and in many cases, it doesn't just look professional. So, and second, I guess it's just a cheap game. You don't need to play it. So use proper tables and don't use pictures. Same thing with primitive graphs done in Excel. So sometimes people use like graphs that look so amateurish that, again, not a problem, but again, you want to stick with, conventions. Other things that not really bother me much, but I think it bothers some reviewers. Like, for example, your email address. If your email address at hotmail.com or something like that, Gmail is sort of acceptable, especially if you come from a country where the university doesn't give you .edu email address. I suppose it's fine. But somehow when you have like a Hotmail account or Yahoo account, I don't know, it's hopefully not a big deal for most editors. Hopefully they recognize that not in every country people use a university email, but it immediately suggests that you are either not an academic, so you're some sort of an amateur, maybe professional who decided to write a paper, or that you come from a university that doesn't even issue a university email address. And again, that usually sends like a little negative message that may lower your chances of being accepted by like 2%. The truth again is that the editors shouldn't look at your affiliation, they should look at the quality of the paper. But again, in my experience, affiliation matters, and some editors sort of have a harder time rejecting the paper if it comes from a top university, like from Harvard or Stanford, and are much more comfortable doing so when you have like a Hotmail account and you're not even associated with any university. So again, you don't want to give them extra reasons to enact that bias against sort of, bias based on your academic pedigree, so to speak. So little things like that, pay attention to them. Again, they will not disqualify you per se, but some editors may be a little bit less likely to accept your paper when they see those red flags. And I'm going to stop here. I'm curious from my end, though, if other editors, if that's just my biases or that's my experience, or you too notice these things and sometimes get a little bit less favorable towards those manuscripts, or if you've seen other editors to do it.
Yeah, it's open for other editors if they want to speak to that.
Lars, I fully agree to your points, and I think, can you hear me actually? Is my sound working? Yeah.
Yes.
Good. I agree to the points mentioned, because when you are an editor, I mean, you sit there on a Friday afternoon or on a Saturday even and get these submissions, and you would like to rather quickly figure out, is it an article that has potential? And at the moment that you get this feeling of the authors are maybe inexperienced, or there is something in terms of the quality, so everything that raises doubts inside of you makes the work harder for you. So whenever you have a file that looks well done, is good made in terms of the graphs and all these formatting details that Vas has just highlighted, that gives you a first feeling of trust. And then you start digging deeper and reading into the content. And so I think this really has an influence. So if the first impression that you get gives you this feeling of insecurity, this is not a good start. So I would definitely recommend following what Vas has outlined.
And actually, Nicola, we'll let you continue, but just as a reviewer, I have the same, I think it trickles down to review levels too. So when you see those types of flags that Vas mentioned, it is a little note in your head as a reviewer that, wait, this person's probably not experienced or whatever. So it's just not a good thing if you don't format it correctly and present it in an appropriate academic format. Yeah. So with that, Nicole, I'll turn it over to you, and you can go next if you like. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for having me. I'm delighted to be here and see so many wonderful colleagues. It's a pity that we don't see the participants. I already have some fantasies on what is going on the other side. But so as I was a little bit late, I do not know, David, if you had the chance to introduce me. My name is Nicole. I'm the editor-in-chief of the European Journal of International Management. And I've brought a few slides just to help me a little bit, guide me through the 5 minutes that I have been assigned. Let me try to share my screen. I hope it's working. Give me some kind of a sign.
It's working. Yep.
Wonderful. Yeah, as said, I took over as an editor-in-chief for the European Journal of International Management in June this year. I have been the vice editor-in-chief together with Elon Allen, who has been the editor-in-chief before that. So I've been involved with this journal for quite some time, and have now the wonderful task of managing this beast from June on. And it's a fun job. It's something very nice with all these submissions, it's creative ideas. Getting in touch with authors, with reviewers. So I really enjoy working on the journal. Let me give you some insights into the journal. I do not know how well known it is. I have the feeling we sometimes are not top of mind when people think about international management, international business journals. We are rather young, founding year 2017 by a couple of quite popular, famous authors in the field. And the initial idea of the journal was international management with a focus on Europe. This focus on Europe is no longer there, so we are open for any kind of submissions that relate to international management, international business. So this is the only requirement we have. It has to be IB/IM. And I think Vas has highlighted it. We also have a lot of submissions that are not related to IB and the IM context, which immediately lead to a desk rejection. So this is really a core criterion that we have to publish with us. Yeah, I would not like to talk too much about the history, but maybe give you kind of an overview of what it is that we publish. In terms of topics, we pretty much cover the whole portfolio of topics that you could do in international management, newer topics from digitalization, corporate social responsibility, of course, included. And we have quite a good history also of publishing research that relates to cross-cultural management and also international human resource management. When we look back at publications in the journal, there was recently a bibliometric study. I see that international human resource management, talent management, cross-cultural management were core areas in the journal for quite some time. We also have several papers that were published on international entrepreneurship. I think that's also something that is maybe a little bit more represented in our outlet than it is in other IB or IM journals. So that's maybe something special. In terms of the approaches or the format of articles that we publish, we are open for conceptual or theoretical papers to be published, methodological empirical papers. Here, the full portfolio, quantitative or qualitative, there's no preference of the journal whatsoever. In fact, we are a journal with a huge history of qualitative research. I mean, now these bigger top journals in the field all call for more qualitative studies. We have done that for quite some time. So, and we still welcome these qualitative studies as well as quantitative studies, which have been become more popular in the last years. We also publish review papers. I know that many leading journals in IBIM do not accept review papers immediately, but often have this kind of agreement stage where you have to submit a proposal and then become accepted as a proposal and then are invited to publish a review study. So we are open for your review papers, for bibliometric studies, meta-analysis. All of this would work for us. In terms of a new kind of endeavor that we would like to try is we are also open for papers that have a format of a research note. So we had the feeling in the team that sometimes research is missing that gives kind of more hands-on advice on certain, for example, methodologies, philosophies. I'll give you an example from my field. We are researching into necessary condition analysis, and a research note format could be a small piece where the audience is introduced into what is it actually, how do you use it, how does it work in very brief terms. Could also be a note on how do you calculate a certain cross-cultural index that is proposed, a diversity team index that is proposed. How do you actually do this? What are the examples? What is the critical reflection in terms of advantages and disadvantages? Maybe even a tool set that comes along with it. So all of these kind of papers or ideas are also welcome, and we are very open if you have these kind of ideas based on the X-Culture data set to discuss. We don't have such a professional open hour that, as Jennifer has introduced for the journal as a digital openness. We are just approachable. So send an email and then we are fine to discuss these ideas. Yeah, another thing that is of specific relevance to this audience, the European Journal of International Management has what we call an ongoing special section. There's a call for papers on our website. I have posted the link here on the slideshow, and I can put it into the chat in a second, on X-Culture and global virtual team research that is hosted or guest edited by Vas, who has just given the presentation, Alfredo Jimenez, and Ursula Ott. And we also have several associate editors who are very active in the field of X-Culture and also global virtual team research. I would like to mention Mariana Gunkel, who is also quite active in the field. Meaning we have a team of people who are very familiar with the X-Culture dataset and the X-Culture project. And eGym is open to receive your submissions in the field. In the special section, call for papers, we outline a few areas. And we are just in this week, or hopefully next week at the latest, finishing a short editorial note with some bibliographics and some more detailed ideas on what it is that you could publish on Global Virtual Teams, or even using the X-Culture dataset. So I hope that this will be out soon to give you some ideas on what it is that we would be specifically interested in this area. An ongoing special section, why is it special in a sense? We have this specific sub-team of people taking care of that. Vas, Alfredo, and Ursula taking the leading role here. So whenever there's an incoming submission that is kind of automatically assigned to their desk, Vas has outlined it. Normally the procedure is it's on my desk and then I redistribute it. In this case, it's automatically landing at the table of our guest editor team, and they take over the responsibility of initiating the review process and handling the paper. Sometimes in these meet the editor sessions, I'm asked on what is the acceptance rate, what is the rejection rate. I have some numbers here on the slide, but I would also like to highlight, I think that these numbers are a bit tricky because we have so many desk rejects actually that are related to scope. That I do not know if this indicator is really telling anybody anything about the quality or the difficulty of getting into the journal. So we have a rather low acceptance rate in total. We have been more critical throughout the years that the journal got established. And we have a huge movement at the moment also to increase further the quality of articles that we publish. But I think that's a very regular and normal process. And don't be frustrated or I don't have a fear to submit due to these kind of percentage values that you see here. If you have a solid paper, we definitely can work with this, and we are very open and approachable to ideas. So please just get in touch and figure out where's my paper, what is the positioning, does it fit? These are some numbers. I do not know where the audience is coming from that is sitting here in our webinar. Many, I think, are following these typical rankings. We are at the moment at the ABS 2 level with our journal. In the German ranking, we are at a B level. Look at this Harzing Jour list. If you are familiar with this, there you find all the different values and ranks for the journal. I think we are going to develop further. We are working on these metrics on our quality. So I think we should develop into a good direction in terms of the quality. I don't know if I should highlight this too much. We have a team. What you find on the website, and maybe this is more relevant for you when you go to our website, you find our full team of senior handling editors. You see that we have many people from all over the world. And what you see on the website as well is we provide information on their specialization. So if you have a paper that goes into a certain direction, if it's X-Culture, then it's for sure going into the special section. But if it's something, I do not know, with a marketing topic, you will immediately see who it is that could be the handling person of this paper. So have a look at the website and figure out who are the persons who might be the ones handling your paper more actively. I'm just checking. Maybe a note on the process. I think the process itself, how it works, is kind of clear. What is an issue or has been an issue for our journal is that we had for quite some time now a huge backlog of accepted articles. So some of the authors who have accepted papers with us have a long waiting time between acceptance and the offline publication. So this is something that we are suffering from, and some authors are of course not happy about this long time span. This was happening because we received more papers than we could publish for quite some time, so it piled up. The problem is solved. We have now increased our number of issues to 12 per year, but we are still working on kind of removing this backlog. But if you are now submitting a paper to us, going through the normal review process, this is not something that you will suffer from. But still, there might be author teams who have accepted papers a year, 2 years ago. That might tell you, watch out, there's a long waiting time for eGym. Fully true and fully right, but I can assure you a problem is solved. So please don't take this as a reason for not submitting a paper to us. David, I think that's it before I stress the time too much.
Yeah, no, thank you, Nicole. I appreciate you mentioning that. Actually, I have a paper that's in that situation. So I had a co-author that was questioning it the other day. So that explains it all. I can go back and it didn't get lost. It's just in
Yeah,
the queue, so to speak. Yeah.
exactly.
So I appreciate you noting that. Yeah.
Yeah. And what we try to do is we try to motivate all the teams to put their papers into ResearchGate and into all these platforms to make them available to the community. We are also fine with, we are quite active in LinkedIn, so we try to make some posts, make some promotion for the articles, because that's the key concern, of course, if you have published or accepted a paper and it's not visible to the audience. I think that is the core thing about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for, for this.
No, it happens. Most people are happy to get the acceptance, and that's good. Yeah. So, okay, thank you for that. I'm going to switch over now to Gordon. Appreciate your patience there, Gordon. He's the associate editor, or he's the co-editor of Management Teaching Review. So, Gordon, it's yours.
Great, thanks so much. I've learned a lot so far in the session from others, so that's great to hear. And I'll talk a little bit about my journal. So we are also sponsored by the Management Organizational Behavior Teaching Society, like the Journal of Management Education is. So we are sister journals. I was trying to think whether we're sister journals. I kind of feel like that's accurate. Jen, if you want to disavow that, that's perfectly fine. But so we've been running since 2016, with articles coming in earlier than that as well. We're on volume 8. And so what we do is we publish something a little different from some of the other people you've heard today, because what we publish is, we don't publish empirical work. We publish basically the cool things you do in your classroom or with your class, of primarily experiential exercises in what you do. So we're looking at, we actually have a very short format, just 2,000 words for our papers. And we have 5 different sections those go into. And really, to me, this is about sharing cool things you are doing with your class. Certainly, X culture fits in this. I can think of a lot of different ways. Parts of what you do or how you do it could be a fit in some of the different sections that we have for the journal. So I'll talk through those a little bit here and about the journal in general. But we offer kind of a nice format for really talking about what you've done, how you've done it, and how another educator could do what you've done and use that cool thing that you're using. And so we try to make for a very accessible format, a very understandable format. And while we do have references, we do want you to be submitting something that is not something a bunch of other people have already done. We are relatively reference light. We don't have a big lit review. Rather, we kind of set the stage and then you say, hey, this is the cool thing I did. And this is how you could do it in your classroom, whether it's face-to-face or online or what it is. So sort of general stats related to the journal. We have about acceptance rate is about 20% right now. We just got at Scopus recently, and we are on the Australian Business Dean's list as a C for anybody who looks at those types of metrics. Generally, what type of sections does our journal have? Well, we've got 5 sections, essentially. The first section that most people submit to, the highest percentage of papers go to, is experiential exercises. So it's something you have done in your classroom, whether it's face-to-face, whether it's online. You've had students experience something that helps them to learn or helps them to be more engaged or connect together. And so if you look at our website, you'll see sort of the parts of that. But essentially, you're talking about, here's a little bit of theoretical foundation of what our area is, what we're about. Here's our learning objectives of what was done. So this is what students should get out of the exercise. And then you're coming up with a very clear description of how you run the exercise, how it works, what type of formats, what type of classes you'd use it in. So those step-by-step instructions. And then you give your debrief. How do you debrief? How do you talk about it? And debrief is an important part of what we look for in these areas, because we want to make sure lessons are captured, and that really, if an instructor uses this, they've gotten a pretty good idea from your article of how you use it and what type of problems might come up or things you might have to deal with an instructor. And so it's really something you could use out of the box of reading that article right away. And then we do, so 2,000 words is your main document amount. We do allow appendices as well. And so what a lot of people do with their appendices, which doesn't count for the 2,000 words, is that is where they will throw in their, assignment sheets, supplemental materials. People might include their slides. They'll include things like charts with more details about various aspects. And so you've got that short, to the point description of the exercise with an appendix often providing some additional information or additional content that you might have that would be useful. And so that's one of our main sections that we have. I'll give a link to just our guide for authors here to look at. That's one of our 5 sections. Another section we have is format translations. Format translation is all about talking about when you've taken an exercise, that was face-to-face and moved it online, or you've taken something from executive education and moved it into a classroom setting or things like that. And so you talk about kind of your own personal journey in doing that, some of the lessons you've learned about translating something into a format, and of course, this exercise that somebody could use from a different format themselves in it. So kind of a dual goal that you have out of that. We have as well practice to research connection articles. Practice to research tries to get at the idea of, hey, I do something in my classroom, a practice of maybe how I grade or how I interact with students or how we, sort of flow through what the class is about. This is something that I do that seems effective, but we really could use some research to understand why and how that works about. And so it's kind of a cool way to talk about things you might be doing every day that you've found works, but no one else, there's not articles on it. No one else that you've heard is really doing it, but you think, hey, this is something that we really should figure out. Why does this work so well for me? Why does this work in my context? And yeah, you can do a bunch of testing yourself and write a great article for it, maybe for the Journal of Management Education plug or a different journal. But also this is something where we can start to think about, okay, what does my practice suggest? What concepts does it connect with? Why might it work based on theory? What should we test on it? And so I see articles like this could be a great fit to start thinking about a practice you do and why. And you might expand that into more of a rigorous test, an empirical test for a different journal in the future. So that's practice to research. I'm doing a thing. We should research it. And this is what people should look at. We have sort of the flip side of that, which is research to practice. So what we do in this section is all about, we have all this great research about pedagogy, what works and why. We've got all of these areas of management and psychology and others that explain how people function. How about, can we apply it to our classrooms to make them better? And so it's taking that research to then say, because of what we know about grading, you should be grading like this, or because we know about how people experience stress, you might want to take this into account in your own classroom and the practices you do. So it's not as much of, hey, I do this exercise, which sometimes people submit those and they don't fit. It's more of my practice of teaching could be affected by this research that exists, and this is why you should do it too. Great example of this, we had a very cool paper recently that looked at the use of movie clips in classrooms, and they talked about all the research we have related to diversity could be applied to this and how we decide what clips to use. So yeah, our clips should not just be, old 80s movies with white dudes. We should be really thinking about how can we make sure everything gets represented by the clips we use and how we integrate them and even how we frame and contextualize them. So a very cool paper that really looks at, we got all this research. This research could affect how we do our practice of teaching. So research to practice, we got the research, we should use it. Practice to research, I'm doing this thing, it's cool. Somebody should look at why and really look into it. So those are the two differences. So they've got a lot of the same words in different order, and it gets people confused sometimes, but they are very different in what their goals are. And then the last one we have is what's called a resource review. Resource reviews are a great section because it's talking about some resource, something you could use in the classroom, and a number of different ways that you could do it. This is the section where you might put something together related to like using technology in the classroom. So we had a great paper by Stuart Middleton about using TikTok. He uses TikTok in his class. And so he talks about how this tool of TikTok can be used to increase engagement in a classroom setting. He talks about a bunch of different ways that can be done. This is a section we've often seen people submit things like papers related to movies they've used. They talk about how that movie could be used in a number of different ways, which is a pretty nice thing to write about. And yeah, that idea of technology or textbooks or other resources, all of this stuff falls into this area. And so you're talking about that. It is supposed to be something that it's not something you're trying to sell. So don't write a resource review of your own book and say how it's amazing and every class should use it. Rather, it's something else that you've found that you think really helps. And you're kind of talking about how you've used it in teaching, talking about how people could use it, and kind of comparing and contrasting to other things. So why should you use Kahoot versus some other program for having people do quizzes or interact? We've got a great article on that that talks about Kahoot, compares it, contrasts it with other stuff that you could use, as well as, our paper on TikTok talks about it comparing to other sites. So again, it's a great way to kind of share these interesting resources people are using in their classroom. It's not an experiential exercise like you might see from, okay, we go through this thing. It's what are all the different ways that I use TikTok and how could you, is kind of what you might see in this section. So 5 different sections that we use. Certainly, we're always happy if you want to reach out and ask us questions about where something fits. There sometimes is some confusion about, is this an experiential exercise or is this a resource review? And especially for some things like a movie, is a movie an experiential exercise or a resource review? What I would say with a lot of that, it depends on how you interact. So if you watch a movie and then have people sort of write on their own or do things on it, a lot of times that's going to be more like a resource review. Well, if it's about sort of experiencing aspects of the film and what you do, and as a group, that experience happening, that tends to fit more in that other section. I always recommend when people submit to the journal, read other articles in there in a similar area. So if you submit a paper on a movie, and I can tell you've never read any of our 20 different articles that are for movies, that's going to probably put you in a bad place to, get accepted, or not put you in a good place to start. More revisions necessary, the potential of being rejected. So there's a bunch of stuff we have in the journal that you could take a look and say, hey, I'm using this electronic tool. How can I write it up? Well, we got multiple examples of that right in our queue that you could look at of previous articles. So I always recommend read the journal. And then, of course, it is always reasonable to cite those articles if they inspire you in the actual article. And it does show, oh, yeah, you do know this journal, you do know what it's about. In terms of our papers, what's out of scope? Well, in my case, out of scope is often very easy, because if we get a 5,000 word empirical paper, I can say this definitely don't fit our scope. It ain't 2,000 words. It ain't about a management teaching thing. It's out. And so we do get a number of those papers. Again, I assume people submit them to a bunch of stuff and hope something works out. Other things, you do want to make sure that what you're doing is not just, hey, we use case 3 in the textbook. Case 3 in the textbook is not a unique enough contribution for it. And we do get that sometimes. And I would check, look in the journal, have we published on a movie before or a topic area? And what have people done? So if you're going to be publishing on something, is it unique? A movie like 12 Angry Men, great movie. People have used it in a bunch of areas. But if you're going to try to submit something on that, we've already got a paper on it. It better be a really unique usage for this film that I've not seen for it to even have a chance to move forward in the journal and what it does. The other part, of course, here is we can only base it on what you submit. So you might have done the coolest thing in your classroom and everybody's loved it, and you've won 40 teaching awards at your university for it, and it might be awesome, but we can only judge it based on the content you submit to us and how well we think it applies elsewhere. And sometimes we do get that where somebody is a master teacher and they present something where if I presented it would fail miserably, but because of their great expertise, it works amazing. Those things are great, but you need to be able to that our readers, whether they've been teaching for a year or for 50 years, can apply it and use it in their classroom where they might not have the exact skill set or the exact knowledge base that you have. And so that's what I would say is a lot of times you can bring in with assumptions where it's like, my assignment sheet is clear. And I'm like, ain't clear to me. I just had somebody recently with that where I asked, well, what outside readings do you need? And they're like, none. I was like, okay, you need to make that clear here, because the way I read it, you probably need multiple readings as well as the movie you're watching. Again, it's just making it very clear for this audience that they can pick up and use it right away. And I don't have to be in your head or texting you at 2 a.m. How the heck do I make this work? So yeah, that's the overall summary, I think.
Okay. Thank you, Gordon. Yeah, I think we've had a really good balance of different types of journals, different types of focus, pedagogical to basic and theoretical, qualitative and quantitative. There's a lot of opportunities. As I mentioned to the editors in an email prior to this, in this group, there's a lot of different ranges of types of researchers, from the quantitative oriented that can do the hierarchical modeling and do all the things that you need to do to get published at a higher level. And then there are others that aren't at that level, but have great ideas to publish. And we've got a range of opportunities, I guess, is the point here, with different journals, with different levels of focus. So hopefully everybody was listening and can understand that there's opportunities, particularly with X culture and teaching with it. There's any number of opportunities there to publish at any one of your journals. So I certainly appreciate the time and effort you guys have spent to do this. I would like to open it up to any questions. I know I have one in the Q&A and from Antonis. If there's others, we have Ernesto. We have several. Let's start with Antonis's question. He was first. It's for Jennifer. Regarding the instructional change in context, how does the format structure of the article look like? Can you recommend one example?
Yeah, I answered in the chat. There's a recent article that was published about creating a new student evaluation of teaching model at an institution, episodic process. And so that is one example of a recent one. And there's others. People should feel free to email Melanie and I. It's less common compared to our empirical articles, but we really would like to see more of these change process models about implementing. Maybe you've taken something you read at MTR and implemented in your classroom, and it was a really new innovation, right? You could write about that change process. And so one of the things I want to highlight for the two pedagogical journals is that there are ways to create synergies by being a scholarly and reflective instructor that does social research, that you can really use what you're doing in the classroom and write about it. And so just start writing. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
The next one is for Nicola. Isn't the limit, it's from Ernesto Tavaletti, isn't the limit of 3 papers under review at EJIM too strict for X culture papers having many co-authors? I had one recent reject for that reason. I fixed the problem by removing the author having more than 3, but ... Thank you, Ernesto.
I think that's a good question, because we have a few kind of these automatic checks that we as editors don't do ourselves. So the InterScience system is doing some pre-screening of articles, and they have implemented their publisher-wise rules. That is not our ideas, these things. So these rule of 3 Or there's, I think, a rule that the reviewers that are proposed by the team members are not allowed to come from the same country as the authors. And that could also be very difficult if you are submitting in a big team of authors in the X-Culture context. So please, whenever you face these difficulties in the system and you get these kind of messages that have a very standardized look and feel, get in touch, send us an email and say, hey, we have this article we would like to submit. We are suffering from the system not letting us make the next step because of this and that reason. We always find a solution to that. So we can unfortunately not switch it off for eGym. We have to follow the InterScience rules, but we will always find a way to circumvent these interesting regulations.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, another question for Nicola. Does the article need to be either authored or set in Europe?
Yeah, I try to highlight that. So the journal has a root in European management research or European international management research, but that's no longer the case. So we accept papers that relate to all areas of the world. The authors can come from one country. So the author team does not need to be settled at some place. It's completely irrelevant for us. But the article itself has to have a connection to international management and international business.
I think that's a good point that all of you have made, that for people watching is, and I think everybody here would have something related to international business, but the big issue there is to remain within the focus of the journal and the formatting, to pay attention to all of those things. Vaz, it sounds simple, but the stuff that Vaz was saying in his presentation about the font and the formatting, even when I first published, I thought I would be fancy with some of my tables and make them look pretty. And I realized really quickly that's a bad idea, right? You want to be in the normal format of the tables that the journal normally accepts. So it's easy to go back and look at a journal's format and the way they publish tables, and to make sure that your tables and the way your formatting is set up before you submit. I think Vaz was smart to do that. A lot of people don't pay attention to those things, especially if they're inexperienced or they're new publishers. And it's important to understand that people want content and not flash with papers and submissions. Are there any other questions out there? Those are the ones that I think we've covered them all in the Q&A session or section.
David, can I jump in while we're waiting for another question?
Of course.
I want to just emphasize that the editors, we really want to be able to say yes to getting papers into peer review. It's our top priority. And that's why I think Voss tried to articulate anything that creates like, distraction for the editor or the reviewers. We want to just minimize those so that your ideas can be accepted into peer review. And one important step that a lot of people aren't trained on is writing your cover letter. And the cover letter is a great way to build trust with the editor. As Nicole was saying with us earlier, right, we need to build confidence, and Voss gave us a list of ways to build confidence in your expertise by following formatting guidelines. And so the cover letter is not a cut and paste of your abstract. It's really starting a conversation and pointing to the contribution. And there's different norms for different journals, but also be sure to address the journal editors appropriately. And if you're not familiar with who they are, you can just look it up on the webpage. And so use appropriate greetings and salutations and titles that shows a level of care and detail. Oftentimes I get article or cover letters that say, "Dear Sir," and that tells me that the person is a little careless because they're not taking the time to research. So that's a great way, is to use the cover letter to build the relationship and show that you're really putting your best effort forward into the manuscript, so we and our team can do the same.
Great advice. Yeah. Okay, I think with that, we've gone a little over. Normally these last about 1 hour, but it's all really informative. I want to give a shout out to all of you, and Jennifer, thanks for your help in coordinating several of the editors, but all of you for what you do. Nicole, I think you're up again in a couple of weeks, or Vaz has requested that. Nicole has a lot of experience publishing also with this data, not just being an editor, but publishing with it. So that's one thing I want to bring up before we sign off. There is another XRIG seminar in a couple of weeks on Friday, October 6th. It's on doing research with X culture data. Vaz will lead that discussion with a couple of panelists from that have a lot of experience publishing at high levels with X culture data. It's going to cover what kind of data X culture collects, the research already completed, ongoing research projects, promising venues for future research, how to request the data, and then research collaboration opportunities. I don't know, there are others here that can speak to this, but it'll happen in that seminar. But the data is vast and it's big, and it does take a certain level of experience or knowledge to navigate it appropriately and use it in appropriate contexts. But once you do that, there's plenty of opportunities to use what's even already out there without collecting new data in innovative ways. So I encourage everybody who's here to participate in that event also. With that, I think we're ready to sign off. Thank you again to all of the editors. You guys have been great. It's very informative. I learned something from each of these, and it helps me. So I'm sure it helps other people too. And we look forward to doing this again. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, David. Will the recording be posted somewhere on the Experiential website?
I'll speak with Vaz and Srishti about that. They usually post it on the X Culture website, but I'll stop the recording and it'll be posted. And everybody else who's still here, several of the editors have posted their presentations in the chat room. But if you need a copy of that, email me and I'll be happy to forward it to you.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Yeah.
Have a great Friday. Enjoy the weekend, everybody.
You too. Thanks for being, you're up late over there. It's early here. Take
Bye.
care.